I hope I can tell you a few of those stories in the next 20 minutes or so. So I'll just grab that little figure. And I have to say that Hear and Say is a program for deaf children. And it started right here within a kilometre of where we are right now. So I started this program in my husband Peter's and his physio room and where I started my private speech pathology practice down on the corner of Morley Street and Milton Road in the Caterpillar Shopping Centre. So we are a very, very local group, and having moved around a little bit as time went on and we grew bigger and bigger, I have to say I haven't moved very far at the moment. We're down in Auchenflower in Munro Street. So I'll tell you.
Old school.
It's not, is it? Oh, look, there are so many people I know who went to school or went to Cubs or Scouts or kindergarten in that building, and it's been almost every denomination of church. So yes, that's definitely part of the story. So I think I'll start by telling you a story. I can't even think how long ago it was, but I was a speech pathologist, graduated in 1964. So, so it's a very long time ago, and one day as I was working in adult head injuries, so adults who had had strokes or car accidents, I was going up the hill behind Princess Alexandra Hospital one day to try and find a gentleman who, and test him. He'd just had a stroke. And as I went up the hill, I met a young man who was about 15 years old, lying in the gutter and screaming. He was lying on his back and he was drumming his heels into the gutter. Very, very unusual. And I asked him what was wrong and he wouldn't stop screaming. So I assumed he'd been hit by a car and started to race up the hill very fast to find a doctor, when a lady came out of a nearby house and she signed to the boy. And what I found out later she signed was, "Are you sick?" And he signed back, "No, my bus money has rolled into the drain." And I realised then that he was deaf and I couldn't speak to him and he couldn't speak to me, and we just absolutely couldn't communicate. So that really has stuck with me and is probably one of the sources of my huge passion that has kept me going for the last 21 years since I started Hear and Say. So a number of years after that, my own children were old enough to be able to think, well, I could perhaps work with children instead of adults. Maybe I had enough patience, and I started work with children with hearing loss in a signing program, and learned to sign, and we did very well, but it was always a problem that the children could not hear, and they could very rarely ever learn to listen and speak. So I decided that I would take this on as a mission. I'm not one to say I can't do anything, and I'm also have a very independent streak, and I just decided I would see what I could do to change things. So what I'm going to tell you today is basically the story of that. So Hear and Say is a centre which I started on the 6th of July 1992, just round in Morley Street here, because of child need. And I started with 6 children. I had 6 children in my private practice whose parents just could not pay for their private speech pathology. I'm a speech pathologist. And I decided that I would start up a not-for-profit and just see how I could go. But also I knew that the cochlear implant was coming. It had been invented in Australia in the 1970s by Professor Graham Clark, and an ENT surgeon in Melbourne, and I knew it was coming. And the first child in the world had been implanted in Sydney in 1987, and around 1990 I thought the government should have been doing something to prepare for this. And they weren't doing anything. So I thought, right, well, I'll just show them. I'll do this for 4 years. I'll set this centre up, give these parents a boost along by letting them have their therapy free. And my husband paid the overheads for me. And we managed very well with just 6 children, and the rest is history. So Hear and Say, you can see the websites there. Today we know that listening and speaking is the birthright of every child. Can you see?
Yes, that's one.
Stand right over here. Because these days, children who are deaf, even those who are totally deaf, who can't hear a jumbo jet go over their head, can learn to listen and speak just like you and me, and can have anything their heart desires. So we know that our Hear and Say partners are the key to deaf children listening and speaking. And clear, natural spoken language is an absolute reality. I used to visit groups, a lot of Rotary groups, because they were my best supporters, and tell them about this. And I used to have so many knockers, not from the Rotary groups, but from my own group of professionals, and who used to say, you can't possibly do that, and it won't work, the copy impact won't work, the technology won't work. So I decided only 12 years ago to go back to the University of Queensland and do a doctorate. And what I found is I got two groups of children with hearing loss from Hear and Say, and a group of children with normal hearing that I matched together for a lot of different parameters. And I found that both groups of children could progress at exactly the same rate. And this has set a benchmark for the rest of the world. And now everyone else has to step up to that mark instead of criticising. So that's probably closer to the end of the story. But in simple terms, deafness is no longer a lifetime issue, a lifelong issue, but rather a very resolvable hearing condition. It's the first time in history that a sense has been able to be replaced, and the first time in history that a very, very serious disorder with serious impact has able to be completely reversed. So the time now is the time for redefining what it means to be deaf in Australia in today's world. So we know that when a baby is born with hearing loss, they've already had 20 weeks of deprivation of hearing while they've been in the womb. When the child's in the womb, they can hear soft, muffled sounds. They can hear their mother's voice, their father's voice. They can recognise their mother's favourite soap opera. They really learn a great deal. And by the time they're born, they have an amazing ability to learn to hear, and their brain has had lots of development. So they're born with a brain that's pre-wired for learning to listen through language. And the neural pathways or the nerve pathways that are accessed through listening and speaking just grow and turn from little rotted lanes into 6-lane freeways, which allow for automaticity or automatic learning to listen and speak if they get the right auditory stimulation. And to achieve these best outcomes, there's a number of things that must happen. We must combine newborn hearing screening, hearing technology, which is the very best and latest for that child, and early intervention, which the best sort that I know works best for children, having tried a lot, and according to my research is a group of research called auditory verbal therapy type of practice. Auditory verbal therapy is really special. We used to treat deaf children in groups, and we used to teach the children, thinking we were doing the right thing. But what we know now from neuroscience research is that if we teach the parents to teach the children, the parents go home because they love the children, they talk to them in play activities all day long with enough frequency and of a particular quality, if we teach them the right way, that they can actually rebuild those auditory brain pathways.